But it gives me much pleasure to be here. I do not have a written speech. In fact, I did not have a speech at all until about 5 minutes ago. So I'm going to speak on the top of my head. Essentially, the theme, of course, of the conference is about leadership and being heard and recognized, which kind of is quite contextual if you think about it, given the fact we're running into elections in about 3 weeks' time. Now, everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be recognized. What methodologies they use, of course, is really what I want to talk about. And I think leadership is all about, before you actually can be heard and can be recognized, is what type of leader you are. And I think that is really critical. And I'm sure the various expert speakers who are here will touch upon that. And I can speak from a public office perspective, as somebody who came from the private sector and then into a public office. I think it is very, very interesting to make that transition, but also to be able to see it from both perspectives, and hopefully it'll bring, at least some light or something that you can be able to take from this talk. I think fundamentally what is critical is, in particular from a public office perspective, is that if you hold a public office, there must be integrity within the office that you hold. There must be a fundamental level of honesty in the manner in which you not just portray yourself, but also in the manner in what you do. I think this is very, very critical. What is interesting, just before coming here this morning, I had a very brief meeting with the Prime Minister, and we spent most of our time actually talking about all the different lies that are currently being spread and how people are trying to gain attention by fundamentally lying through the process. Whether it's about state, whether it's about religion, whether it's about land, whether it's about accountability, whether it's about transparency, whether it's about your ability to exercise your rights, whether as an indigenous person or whether as a non-indigenous person, as a Fijian citizen. These are very, very critical aspects that people are obviously talking about. So I think what is really critical is that to be a good leader, you must be able to have a fundamental level of honesty in what you're doing. You must at the same time, to be a very good leader, we believe, that you must have a vision. You must have a goal. Because otherwise your role as a leader will be very, very short-lived. And I can speak from an elections perspective. If, for example, people are only telling truths or lies, whatever the case may be, to simply win office, then the next time when they want to come around to gain the votes of the voters for the next office, they'll again have to spin something else. So the fact of the matter is to be a good leader, to be a true leader, and to be a leader that's recognized, and indeed one would hope that to be a leader that's going to be remembered. After all, when you want to be a leader to be recognized, you want to be a leader that's going to be remembered. And for people to remember you, and for people to know what you've done more so, in terms of what you're putting at stake, what you're putting forward, it must have a long-term vision. It must have a long-term goal. In the same way, when you're doing your budgets, when you're planning, it simply cannot be just for the week itself. It must be a projected plan for the future. So, in fact, when I was thinking about what to say, the only thing I could grab hold of was this in my bag, which is the Fijian Constitution. And for us, it represents the vision. It represents a set of fundamental rules that will govern our country. Now, these rules actually have essentially what I've just highlighted. It has a set of fundamental rights that protects all citizens of this country. It recognizes the special place, the special needs, the special entitlements of the indigenous people of Fiji, which represent the Itauke, the Rotumans, and also the Banaman people, who have certain customary practices pertaining to land, but more so the Itauke and the Rotuman people. It recognizes the place of all Fijian citizens. It sets in place a certain fundamental set of rules regarding transparency and accountability. For the first time in Fiji's history, we have a provision in the Constitution that says that all public officers, right from the President, the Prime Minister, the ministers, senior public servants, must on an annual basis disclose all the assets and liabilities. That this Transparency and Accountability Commission has the ability to inquire into the private matters. Linked to that, of course, is that you have the Fiji Independent Commission Against Corruption. For the first time, you again have an Independent Corruption Commission that has the ability to independently investigate and prosecute. You also have a Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Commission that again has the ability to provide the forum for individual citizens to be able to go and take the grievances as stipulated under the Constitution. So you have these mechanisms of accountability and transparency. You also have a vast array of socio-economic rights within the Constitution that not only look after one's civil and political rights, but for the first time, it actually includes socio-economic rights, and many people aren't necessarily familiar with that. And I think that you in the private sector also need to be aware of that, because these are enforceable rights. So a person's ability to participate in the economy, to have access to free education, to have access to housing and affordable housing, and access to drinking water, access to transportation, ability to enforce environmental rights, huge array of rights that have been put in, the rights of disabled persons. All of these rights are unprecedented, but nonetheless they are all enforceable. In other words, they're justiciable, that you as an individual are able to take that right or enforce that right through the legal system within the Fijian court system. You also then have, for the first time in Fiji's history, independent institutions that have been given true independence. So for example now, under this constitution, the judiciary, for the first time, is truly independent, where it has its own set of finances. So it's not at the whim of the Ministry of Finance that they can decide, okay, how much money we'll give them. But more so than that, the Chief Justice, if he, for example, wants to move a clerk from Ba to Tavua, he has the ability to do that. Prior to this, he could not. PSC would determine who would be the clerks or who would be the various other office holders with the judicial system. Now it's completely independent. You also have, again, for the first time, a provision pertaining to your ability as individual citizens to have a direct say in the change of the Constitution, where we have now for the first time a referendum system, where all of you Fijians who will be voters, those of you who are Fijians in this room, who can go to vote and who are registered as voters, if the Constitution needs to be changed, apart from the fact that Parliament needs to approve it, now you as individual citizens have the final say whether it should be changed or not, or what section of it can be amended. So there's a whole array of unprecedented structures that have been put in within the Constitution that brings about that level of accountability. The reason why, for example, we have the right to economic participation, the right to just and fair wages, is it's about setting a long-term vision. Because irrespective of whichever political party wins office come 17 September, they all have to ensure that those socio-economic rights are implemented. They all can be brought to a court of law. So the Constitution provides a basic framework for a long-term vision. And I think what is very, very critical, as I said, I think it was last year when I was at this conference, what is more, I think, a requirement in our society to become a lot more developed in terms of progressive, in terms of being forward-looking, is the public space that is critical to allow for what we call valid criticism, constructive criticism. As I said last year, that is unfortunate in Fiji. There's nobody that actually stands up in front of the media or in television and is able to say, I as a financial person or an accountant or an economist, I'm independent, and this is my view on this particular political party's manifesto. Or I as a lawyer believe that what is being suggested is actually incorrect, because in my professional opinion, this is in fact wrong or incorrect, or this is another point of view. 1 year has passed since the last time we had the meeting, but we have not found anybody that's come out forward and has taken that public space and has been able to say that, till today. Because unfortunately, we as a nation are so hamstrung by personalities. We as a nation are so hamstrung by communal differences or communal agendas that if that person stands up and talks and says, oh, he's from Kandavu, that's why he's saying that, and the leader of that party is from Kandavu, or he's a Hindu, that's why he's saying that, or he's a Muslim, or he's a Pentecostal church, or he's Methodist, whatever it is. And we as a nation need to break out of that in order for us to become progressive, in order for us to have valid criticism, in order for us to be able to have constructive dialogue in our country, to be able to do what's best for the country. The reason why I'm highlighting this to you, some of you may think, well, it's not relevant, but I think it's definitely relevant for leadership. Because whether it's in your organization, if in your organization you're going to take steps, if you as a leader are going to make decisions in your organization, and you are yourself, because you are operating in the Fijian environment, going to be hamstrung by these types of issues, whether it's communal issues or whether it's personality issues, your organization will also suffer. And unfortunately, we've seen that also. I worked in the private sector too. Some of the organizations, they also at the end of the day decided to then give certain positions to people because, oh, we've got too many of this group or too many of that group. Meritocracy, ladies and gentlemen, has a lot of validity. Meritocracy is something that we lack in Fiji, or we have been lacking. Most definitely we've been lacking meritocracy in the civil service for a long period of time. And that's essentially what we're trying to bring about. So the points that I'm highlighting to you, hopefully will provide some food for thought in terms of you as a professional, and those of you aspiring to become leaders, and those of you indeed are already leaders within the organizations, whether it's in NGO, whether it's the private sector, or whether it's indeed in government or a statutory body. Because that is very, very critical. And lastly, I'd like to essentially talk about the economy. Because I think in all of this talk currently, none of the political parties, of course, except of course Fiji First, none of the political parties have in fact given you a long-term vision or goal for economic development. I was reading our friend from India, I was reading a little article of his in this morning's paper about the Gen Y, correct? The Gen Y, and that is very much the case in Fiji. 200,000 voters out of 590,000 voters in this coming elections are below the age of 30. Approximately 320,000, voila, are below the age of 40. These people will decide the elections. How they think, what they are thinking about, who do they want, should be the deciding factor, will be the deciding factor. It's very, very critical. People who are now 28 years old weren't voters a few years ago. People who are 14 years old in 2007 are now adults and probably married, some of them. And they've never voted in their entire lives. Because the voting age is now 18. So as leaders, we also have to be concerned about this group. And I completely agree with the sentiments that our friend from India had expressed in the article. And as leaders, as political leaders, as governmental leaders, we need to be aware of the ramifications of this massive demographic that exists in Fiji. And believe you me, in the next 5 to 6, 7 years, there'll be a much larger group who will be below the age of 40. Much larger group. Because if you see the people who are between 35 and 40, they are far less than those below 35. So in terms of your businesses, in terms of your marketing capacity, your ability to market to them, you have to change your whole methodology. I was at the Digicel launch of 4G about a week ago. Again, I mean, I must applaud Digicel publicly again. They have brought about a completely new way of marketing to all Fijians in Fiji. The ability to touch on individuals, I think, has been quite remarkable compared to, although I was sponsored by Vodafone, I forgot. Sorry about that, Vodafone. Sorry. Oh, boo-boo. But anyway, well, I'm sure they don't mind. The fact is this, ladies and gentlemen, we all need to think outside the box. And it is very critical. And it's not simply a cliche term. because we have to understand the environment in which we are operating. There are many people who may be at the fore, in the same way in your organization, who may talk a lot, who may be seen a lot, but they do not necessarily represent the bulk of the voices in your organization. In the same way, I would like to think that many of the politicians who are talking do not represent the views of the many people who are going to actually vote. So, what is really critical is our ability to be able to provide that leadership to that group of people. How we as leaders are able to not just be able to say things that they will like, but you be attractive to them in the first place. And the only way you can be attractive to them in the first place is that you must understand what they want. You must understand where they're coming from. You must understand what their needs are. You must understand the circumstances. And that is very, very critical as a leader if you want to be recognized. As a leader who wants to be heard. Because you are then being responsive to your constituency, to your people who are you wanting to lead. You know, it's interesting. I remember when the retirement age in the civil service was brought down to 55. There was a lot of talk about it at that particular point in time. But now many people are applauding it. And in fact now we have many young people who are saying, well, despite the retirement age being brought down to 55, we still don't necessarily have a full-time job. Now, about 2 weeks ago, we had some discussion with some young people. A lot of them who are graduates from Bachelor of Education. They all want to become teachers, primary school teachers or high school teachers. Our ability that we've positioned ourselves to be economically strong with a growth rate of 3.8%, unprecedented levels of foreign reserves, unprecedented levels of bank lending to the private sector for a few years at least now. They're all very good signs in terms of the economy growing. It's only when the economy is very strong can the government be able to venture into policies such as free education. There obviously must be continuity in that also. But the point is this, if we are economically strong, and just to give you an example, teacher-student ratio in Fiji is about 1 to 40, about 1 to 35. If you're able to bring down the teacher-student ratio and say 1 to 15, or 1 to even 20, you will automatically, you are creating jobs also, which you need more teachers. You're able to employ more people. But of course, there must be a certain level of sustainability to that type of policy. The government must be able to be economically strong, to be able to continue with those types of policies. And this is precisely what we've been trying to do. And this is precisely what is needed. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, when the dust settles after 17th of September, the everyday person, including all of you in this room, will want to know whether your job is secure, whether there's sustainability in the job market, whether the market is growing, whether there are new roads and bridges being built, whether water and electricity are flowing through the taps and through the wires. That fundamentally is what it boils down to. The workers in this hotel will want to know that they have enough tourists coming in, they do not get sent home for the day. If they have enough tourists coming in, they'll be employed 365 days a year, with the holidays of course. That is the end game, and that is what we must be focused on. All those issues that are currently being talked about land, about rights, they're all guaranteed in here. What is the ball game? Let's not fight about this because it's already here. The ball game is economic growth. The only way that we can do that is that we have sound, sustained economic policies. And we all as Fijians come together to be able to provide that vision and implement it. I'll finish up there, ladies and gentlemen, before it spills over into a massive political rally speech. Thank you for the invitation today. I wish you a very good conference. I also would like to highlight once again that please make sure that on 17th September you go and cast your vote. Thank you.